My Lords, can I thank the committee for this report, even if I don't agree with many of its recommendations. It was a real treat to read, like a great primer or literature review. There's so much of the online safety bill to worry about in terms of free speech that it's hard to know where to focus, so just a few points. I was especially grateful to see a refreshingly nuanced approach in the report to misinformation, which I focused on the last time we discussed the issue. As research from Ofcom notes, many believe that the term misinformation has been, quote, weaponised for censorship of valid alternative perspectives. The report's examples from the lockdown COVID era are pertinent. Expert medical opinion, be it minority, that challenged either governments or the World Health Organization, for example, were labelled misinformation, deemed so by big tech fact-checkers with no scientific qualifications, but, quote, certified by the International Fact-Checking Organisation, whatever that is. All the more important, then, to note, as the report does, that even Will Moy, the CEO of Full Fact, has said there's a moral panic about fake news, leading to a frightening overreaction by governments and big tech. I was also glad the report noted the broader context of what I think is in danger of being a potentially moral panic about online safety. Concerns from free speechers are based on the offline problems of cancel culture and ever-growing attacks on, for example, academic freedom in universities, such that the government is attempting to legislate to enhance free expression on campus, at the same time as undermining free expression online. But I would like to add another offline context, and that is a contemporary therapeutic ethos that posits safety, especially psychological safety, as trumping freedoms of any sort, and I'd hope the committee might look at this at some stage. We cannot discuss online harms without understanding that the concept of harm is an ever-expanding category. But just before I look at that, one clarification. Whenever I raise problems with the bill, the justifications that come back at me always centre on children's safety. And to note, I would be happy if the online safety bill did indeed confine its focus to the young and children. But instead, the government uses adult worries about children's access to porn, self-harm and suicides, all right worries, to introduce huge legislative changes that will affect adult freedoms, effectively infantilising citizens, treating us as dependent children in need of protection from each other's speech. The report tells us that civilised societies have legal safeguards to protect those who may be vulnerable. And the problem is that when it gets to vulnerability is discussed in relation to adults. Because the problem is that in a therapeutic culture, vulnerability and victimhood are valorised, often incentivised, because if we present ourselves as fragile and vulnerable, we have a cultural currency and a power to not only gain attention and support, but to silence others. For example, the report is extremely helpful in deconstructing the whole concept of harm. The committee rightly rails against the illiberal notion of censoring legal but harmful material, and hopefully the government will indeed drop that egregious clause. But the whole premise of the bill is based on the idea that speech online can be and often is harmful. The elastic use of the term harm makes it ill-defined and subjective, fudging physical harm with psychological harm, and no wonder that many now see words as violence. The committee helpfully asked the government if the bill's definition of psychological harm had any clinical basis. The reply came back saying no, but it would be up to platforms to make judgments about speech causing anxiety or fear. This is potentially disastrous, as such terms such as offensive, hate and misinformation, all that kind of subjectivity can be said by individuals to mean that something should be banned. The report notes a few years ago the Christian Union was banned from Balliol College's Freshers' Fair on the basis that its presence would cause harm to some attendees. Goodness knows what they'd make of the harm of having bishops in this place. Then only this week, Cambridge University faculty heads apologised to students for distressing them by sending an email promotion of a, quote, potentially harmful talk. What caused such alarm? A talk by Sex Matters' Helen Joyce entitled Criticising Gender Identity Ideology, What Happens When Speech is Silenced? Oh, the irony. Actually, much speech is silenced on and offline by deploying the language of psychology to suggest that speech, books, ideas are dangerous. Trigger warnings are put on lectures and literature to prevent post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is now not clinically diagnosed post-war or disaster, but with potential harms caused by upsetting speech or words. So even if harm in the bill is medically diagnosed, I think it will not help because psychological language now frequently is used to silence us.